Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar organized by the Belgian Foreign Trade Agency and its partner, the FPS Foreign Affairs, Flanders Investment and Trade, AWEX, and Hub Brussels. It takes place on the occasion of the release of our new sectoral publication, Belgian Sustainable Food Systems. We have a charged agenda for the coming hour, but allow me to just quickly run through a few frequently asked questions. First of all, the slides of the speakers will be made available. You'll receive them via email and find them on our website together with the study. This webinar is recorded and will be uploaded on our website as well. Also, the sectoral publication, Belgian Sustainable Food Systems, will be released immediately following the webinar. This webinar will end with a Q&A. In case you have a question for a speaker, you can put it in the Q&A together with the name of the speakers you address it to. In case your questions won't be covered during the webinar itself, we certainly answer you at a later stage. To kick off the webinar, I have the pleasure to introduce Mr. Jeroen Cooreman, Director Office of Economic Interests, Directorate General Bilateral Affairs, FPS Foreign Affairs. Mr. Cooreman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and I hope you can all see me and hear me. Well, thank you for inviting me to talk about the topic of sustainable food systems, and congratulations on the trade agency for organizing this seminar, because this topic is very actual, but it's also a complicated topic because it has a lot of different elements to it that all needs to be brought together. Now, as we know, the food industry is a key sector of the Belgian economy, with almost 100,000 jobs in 2019 in pre-COVID times. It is by far the biggest industrial employer in Belgium, and it is also a major export sector. Our exports in food constitute about 1/10 of our total exports, amounting to about 27 billion euros, while imports amount to 22 billion euros. So it's really a crucial sector to our foreign trade and therefore to our economy. Now we have seen over the past 2 years two major challenges for this industry. The first one is Brexit, and then the second one, of course, is the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, when we look at Brexit, we just have to realize that for Belgian food businesses, the UK is the fourth largest trading partner, accounting for over 2 billion euros in annual turnover, which means around 10% of our total exports. And it's of course a sector that has been severely disrupted by Brexit. And the conclusion of the trade and cooperation agreement between the European Union and the United Kingdom was therefore a big relief to the food industry. But we should not forget that even with this agreement, Brexit's impact remains significant for the food business, because the industry will face increased administrative hurdles and red tape that they will have to deal with. And then, of course, came the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, which has made clear how interconnected the world has become, also in terms of food supplies. But it has also showed the vulnerabilities of globalized trade and the fragility of our supply chains. The food industry, of course, also had to deal with labor shortages and of course, on the customer side, with the closure of the hospitality, restaurant, events, and tourism industries. And this has had a tremendous impact on food supplying companies. On their revenue base. It has also led to the postponement of several planned investments. But the pandemic could also be an opportunity to build back better, not across the globe, but also in terms of food industry. Sustainability has moved front and center across the economy, and as I said, also in food industry. The pandemic has underlined the importance of a strong and resilient food system that can ensure an adequate and diverse supply of safe, nutritious, affordable and sustainable food for all people under all circumstances. Now, you may ask yourself, what should a sustainable food system consist of? We can find a definition at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, which describes a sustainable food system as a system that delivers food security and nutrition for all in such a way that the economic, social, and environmental basis to generate food security and nutrition for future generations are not compromised. And so this means there are three elements. There is the economic sustainability. Is it profitable and throughout the supply chain? There is the social sustainability. Does it have broad-based benefits for society and all stakeholders? And there is the environmental sustainability. It should have a positive or a neutral impact on the natural environment. So that's what the FAO says. Then when we look at the European level, the European Union also aims to make our food systems more sustainable. Under the European Green Deal, the EU set out its so-called farm to fork strategy that wants to enable all food chain actors to ensure the sustainability of the entire food value chain and to contribute to the Green Deal's climate and environmental objectives. So that forms a framework, and I have to say the Belgian food industry is very well positioned to contribute to a global sustainable food system and to the EU farm to fork strategy, because it is already in many ways today one of the most sustainable food industries in the world. Action has been taken in the fight against food loss and waste, the recycling of packaging and water and energy efficiency. Investments have been made in energy saving measures such as heat recovery or cogeneration installations and in renewable energy production. For instance, we can think about solar panels, heat pumps, or other specific initiatives that have been set up to reduce energy consumption and to reduce CO2 emissions. Belgium is also setting an example in Europe by being the only European country so far to have set up a specific organization for the management of industrial packaging, along with specific legal objectives. So, ladies and gentlemen, a sustainable food system is very important, and that is why it has also been picked up by the United Nations. It lies at the heart of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, that were adopted in 2015. As some of you may know, the SDGs call for major transformations in agriculture and food systems in order to end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition by 2030. When we talk about the SDG framework and food security, we typically refer to the SDG number 2, which is the objective of zero hunger. Now, reaching the objective of zero hunger by 2030 demands a concerted global effort, because even before the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, almost 700 million people, 690 million people, and that is 60 times the population of Belgium, were undernourished. The COVID pandemic and the increased effects of climate change that we start seeing may add many more. It is a situation that is dire, but it should not discourage us. On the contrary, it should push us to action. And so with 9 years more to go towards the achievement of Agenda 2030, Belgium stands firm in its ambition to accelerate progress on the SDG 2 of zero hunger. But of course, if we really want to accelerate progress on this objective, we do not only need more investment, but we need better investment. We need research and innovation to make the food systems ready for the future. We also need a food system that provides sufficient nutritious food for all without further damaging the planet. We should transform value chains by promoting more sustainable practices. We should also make food systems more inclusive and address inequalities, because it is often unequal access rather than insufficient global production that is leaving people hungry. In all regions of the world, women, for instance, are more likely to be food insecure than men, which is why advancing gender equality and women's and girls' empowerment is essential for ensuring food security and nutrition for all. So as you can see, it's a very complex issue with different facets. But let me finish by saying that Belgian companies are very well placed to help us reach this global target of zero hunger. because they prove that ecological sustainability and economic profitability can go hand in hand. And I'm looking forward to learn more about this today, and I wish you all a very interesting and fruitful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooreman, for this really interesting and full presentation. And I would like now to introduce our following stakeholder. It's Fevia with its communication director, Mr. Nicolas Courant. Mr. Courant, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. As a representative of Fevia, Federation of the Belgian Food Industry, I'm obviously very glad to talk about our role in the road towards sustainable food systems. As you'll see on the next slide, with Fevia, we represent a very diverse sector. We have 27 subsectors, ranging from dairy to cookies and everything in between. 69% of which of our members are SMEs. It's something that people tend to forget, but we are at the heart an SME-driven sector. In the next slide, you'll see that our sector is literally at the heart of the food chain. So our members, our companies, will buy their raw products from agriculture, from the agricultural sector, and they will sell it to distribution and retail to eventually end up on your plates as a consumer. So that means that if we talk about moving towards sustainable food systems, it is very relevant to us. It's at the heart, because we are at the heart of that system. And it's something that certainly isn't new to the Belgian food sector. As since 2011, we have worked on a sustainability strategy for the sector. We're actually preparing our fourth sustainability roadmap, as we call it, which will launch at the end of this year. But allow me in the next slides to introduce you a little bit to the current version that we have, a sustainability strategy that is made up of 4 pillars. So you will recognize in these 4 pillars, obviously, the 3 elements that Mr. Cooreman mentioned in referring to the FEO, people, planet, prosperity. We added society to that as well, because society, obviously, we're linking that to everything that is related to health. As we talk about food, health obviously is very important to us. And for all of these elements, we have created a number of objectives, always in a dialogue with our stakeholders and obviously with our members. This is quite broad. In the 4 minutes that we have, it would take us a little bit too far to go very much into detail. But allow me to just give you a sneak preview or some concrete examples of how we actually work on trying to move towards an even more sustainable food system, and how we see our role in taking that commitment. So in the next slides, you'll see an example of a company called Ceval Health Foods. It's one of our SMEs who create the cookies that you see in here, cookies with added fiber. So why do I want to put forward this example? It's just one of the many examples of companies who are investing in innovation to try to offer a more balanced offer to the consumer. And it's an element of a deal that we created together with the government, a covenant to make the healthy choice, the easy choice for consumers. In the next slide, you'll see another example linked to a second pillar, the people pillar. So the images you'll see in here are actually related to the Food Heroes campaign that we launched, unfortunately, I would say, during the COVID crisis. It's a campaign that we launched to support our food heroes, the men and women who actually managed to secure the fact that you still could eat and drink while you stayed at home. But we support them in a number of ways. And one of the very concrete actions that we took is, together with Alimento, our sector fund, we created what we call a career fund, which supports our companies and their food heroes to prepare for the future. And that future is going to be more digital, because our factories are investing in robots and in automation. And we are trying to help our food heroes to adapt to that new situation, knowing that we are the biggest industrial employer in the country. Very important. A third pillar, which you'll see in the next slides, is linked to prosperity. This beautiful image that you see is one of our famous pralines of a company called Neuhaus. So why am I putting forward this example? It's related to a project of the chocolate industry called Beyond Chocolate. And Beyond Chocolate is actually a partnership for sustainable Belgian chocolate industry, together with all the value chain partners up until the countries where we source the raw product, the cacao bean, obviously. We are investing in what we call shared value. And obviously we need exports, we need innovation to support that project and all of that progress. And then the final fourth pillar on the next slide is planet. The more, let's say, the more traditional pillar linked to sustainability. When you look at food production, obviously there is a planetary impact. We consume energy, we consume water, and we need packaging. And packaging has very much been at the front of a lot of discussion, where we see our role in investing in a more sustainable packaging. This is a concrete example that was just launched a couple of weeks ago by one of our companies called Friesland Campina, who have put on the market a new bottle made of 100% recycled content. And that is, again, 100% recyclable. They even added a detachable sleeve, as you can see, to allow a better recyclability of the entire packaging. As a sector, we have actually launched an ambitious plan together with the different governments in our country, where we committed for sustainable packaging and where we actually have 6 very concrete commitments, which go further than the European ambitions, where we sometimes achieve those ambitions earlier than Europe wants us to do. So all of these 4 elements make up our current strategy. But as I said, and I think we can move to the final slide with that, we are actually preparing the launch of a new sustainability roadmap. I welcome you to discover that together with us on November 29th during an online session that will stream via our website, fevia.be, and where our ambition is to co-create a sustainable food system in the years to come. Thank you very much, and open to questions, of course.
Thank you, Mr. Courant. It was really interesting. And I'm now looking forward to the presentation of Mrs. Yuan, International Officers at Wagralim. Mrs. Chai, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christelle. Thank you for all of being here. It's my honor to be here to represent our agri-food innovation cluster of Wallonia called Wagralim. So just next slide, you will see some figures, key figures of the Wallon region in this agri-food market, which is of course also a big sector of at the regional level, which represent more than 20,000 direct jobs and also represent more than 8 billion of turnover of this sector. Some key figures of our organizations. We have already submitted more than 50 projects which are granted by the Wallon government. Of course, some of them are linked to the sustainability. There's more than 200 products and services are launched also through our different services and the project. And there's also different patents that were submitted by our companies. We are a member-based organization, non-profit organizations, and now we have more than 200 members in our network. On the next slide, you will see our missions. I will go through quickly on that, but I would insist that our mission is to accelerate the value creation in the agri-food sectors of Wallon regions through innovation, partnership, and also internationalizations. So based on that missions, diverse services were created. We have technical-oriented services, we have market-oriented services. All of that are there to help our companies. I won't go through in deeper because today's big point is on sustainability. I would like just to show some examples that we are doing on that field. On next slide, you will see the next, please. You will see a project that's called WALEP. So as I said, sustainability is an important subject for the region, and of course is a strategic area also of the cluster. And in that we developed a project with our companies on the farm to create a value chain from the farm to fork on the spelled sectors, meaning we integrated the research actors, process actors, and also the final product companies in order to create a whole value chains and to develop local specialties. And on the next slide, you will also see some different initiatives that we are doing. Fevia previously already mentioned different aspects of the sustainability that we are in collaboration working on that. Of course, the initiative called d'Avenir and a concrete support tool has been developed to help the economic players to help them on the different points of ODDs. So for instance, how to communicate on the existing effort, how to improve, what are the next steps that they can do in order to improve their sustainability status in the near future. We are also an active actors and implicated in the regional circular economy group, and in near future there will also different activities that will be launched, I think, and the initiative is called Circular Wallonia. I think you will be also be informed by this initiative soon. And for more information, you have also my contact detail. You can follow us on our social media and subscribe to our newsletters. And I will be happy to discuss with you on different subjects. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Chais. And I'm now really happy to introduce our next speaker, Mrs. Alexandra Lambert, coordinator at circlemade.brussels. Mrs. Lambert, you have the floor.
Thank you very much to invite me as speaker for this webinar. So I'm the coordinator of circlemade.brussels, which is the cluster for circular economy players in Brussels. But we are also, next slide please, the key actor of the Brussels Regional Circular Economy Plan, which was born in 2016, and the Go for Brussels 2030 strategy. Next slide please. So a few words about Brussels Capital Region. You know that we are a federal state with 3 regions. Brussels is a city region with broad powers in economic, innovation, and environment policies. And the factors who can impact the circular economy is that we have mainly tertiary jobs with 93% of the job of the region. We have no metallic, mineral, or fossil energy, and we have a high dependence on resources, for instance, for agriculture. So the Brussels Regional Program for a Circular Economy was born in 2016 and focused on 5 sectors. And the food sector is one of the main goals, or main target. But we have also waste, logistics, construction, and retail businesses. And the idea is to relocate economy in Brussels, to contribute to job creation, and to put together environmental objectives with economic opportunities. So for the General Policy Statement 2030 of the government, it's focused on carbonated, sustainable, democratic, and social enterprises. The Brussels Donut was a message about this new economy with societal impact. And so the Go for Brussels 2030, it's in reality the regional economic transition strategy, which means a strong alignment of economic objectives on social and environmental objectives. So the first instrument for to develop that policy is the Be Circular call for project, and it's a call for all businesses, SMEs, micro businesses, self-employed people, non-profits, or business partnership. And the government decided this year to double the budget to give 4 million euro direct support per year. And the idea is to increase the funding rate for industrial players active in urban production and good food industry. So the focus is again on good food system. Next slide. So for CircleMed, we are finally an instrument of Be Circular, and we are from the Brussels Agency for Business Support. We are one of the cluster in the ecosystem of the cluster of Hub Brussels. Next slide, please. So what is CircleMed? It's the access to Hub Brussels sustainable economy projects. And in Hub Brussels, you have 6 different clusters, all dedicated to one main sector, as software, Screen Brussels for audiovisual sector, life tech for the medical sciences. But CircleMed is the only multi-sector network bringing together companies active in the circular economy. And we have a team and a strategic committee with 6 companies or members and 4 partners. What are our missions? So we promote innovation and the development of a new circular economy, businesses in the Brussels region. We support the development of our member, and our leverage is to promote exchange between different circular economy players in the region, from the public, from the academic sectors, or for corporate, and we pool resources and expertise together to develop joint projects. So what are our services? We organize meetings and exchanges, company missions abroad. We organize meetings with other networks for our members. We try to provide business opportunities for our members. We organize skill acquisition with training seminars or individual support. And we set up multiplayer projects as a collective support for our member. And how we organize, we are divided in 7 categories, different categories. And we have actually currently 92 members. But among these members, the food category is the main category in the huge one with 21 or 22 members. And we aim to grow the size of the cluster to 200 companies, at least at term. So to enter in the cluster, you have to be in one of these business models who are defined by Accenture. So you have to try to make purchase of renewable, bio-based or recycled resources. In the less is more model, the use better model is the model dedicated to functional and sharing economy. The make it last is the idea to extend the life and in particular the service life of products and to have an eco-design approach. And the close the loop is we use a system of waste transformed into resources. So for whom are our services dedicated is for companies that provide a circular economy offering, for companies in transition to the circular and sustainable economy, and for partners who bring their skills and expertise to support the development of our companies. And you have also to have a turnover of at least 10,000 euro for a year. So it's not a huge amount, but the idea is to don't be in the research and development process of your companies, but to have real activities on the market. Some examples of members in the food category, we have Mon Cafetier, Urban Harvest, Food Collect, Aquaponie Brussels, Burger Mix, BAM, so and Rooster. So we have really different activities in the Belgian sustainable food systems. And the idea is to develop also that category in accordance to the good food strategy of the region. So if you have some contact, you can, if you want to see who are our members, you can go to our website, circlemade.brussels. You can write to our address, circlemade@brussels, and I'm the coordinator, so I'm pleased to answer to your questions too. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mrs. Lambert, for this interesting presentation. So now we know the strategy and tools of Brussels. And I would like now to welcome my colleague, Lorenzo van Elsen, International Trade Analyst at the Belgian Foreign Trade Agency, and who was in charge of this study. He will go through the main findings. Lorenzo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christelle. Good morning, everyone. Let me thank you first for coming in such large numbers to this new webinar organized in collaboration with our federal and regional partners. I will now present you the key findings of the study Belgian Sustainable Food Systems, and 5 major points will be addressed here. So the state of play of the Belgian food industry, the impact of COVID-19 and Brexit on the food sector, which has also been discussed by Ambassador Cooreman, export as a driver towards the Belgian food industry's recovery, sustainable innovation as an international trademark, and finally, the Belgian food industry, already a model student in sustainability. So before digging deeper into facts and figures and numbers, I must tell you that at the time of writing, only the figures for 2019 were available. So in 2019, the food industry sales increased by 5.9% compared with 2018. And this increase was the highest on record since 2011 and the post-crisis recovery. Today, the food industry can thus claim to be Belgium's largest industrial sector. Investments in 2019 were of a total of 1.79 billion euros, which was an increase of 8.8% compared with 2018. In this way, the food industry was by far the biggest industrial investor, with a total of 23.4% of manufacturing investments. The food industry's average rate of investment is indeed higher than that of the manufacturing industry. And this indicates that the food industry has invested a relatively higher share of its turnover than the manufacturing industry. And these investments were, of course, among other things, oriented towards sustainability. As regards foreign trade, in 2019, food and drink exports amounted to 27 billion euros, while imports amounted to 22 billion euros. This does mean that the trade balance therefore represented a surplus of around 5 billion euros. The food industry inevitably remains an important driver of Belgian export, which for the food industry are still mainly concentrated within the European Union and our neighboring countries. However, in the last years, long distance exports, namely to the US, China, or Japan, have been continuously growing. Despite these good performances in terms of turnover, investments, and foreign trade, the food industry has, of course, been particularly hit hard by the pandemic and Brexit. In fact, despite of food supply having been maintained, the coronavirus pandemic has hit the sector hard, particularly as Ambassador Cooreman told, due to the closure of the hospitality, restaurant, events, or tourism industries. This way, on an annual basis, the decline in sales has resulted in a loss of revenue of around 4 billion euros in the food industry, representing a decrease in economic activity of around 7%. And in addition, since Brexit came into force, Belgian businesses for whom the UK is the 4th largest trading partner have been severely impacted and witnessed a fall in their UK exports linked to administrative hurdles and custom-related issues. I encourage all of you to consult the 2020 figures for the food industry, which fall within this new post-pandemic and post-Brexit reality. In this context, of course, it is more important than ever to boost international trade as a driver of both domestic and global food industry recovery. As a matter of fact, the international food market has shown the greatest growth potential with an average increase of 5% per year. And as already mentioned, although our exports to our European neighbors and European countries remain the most significant in terms of value, it is distant exports that have the greatest potential due to their strong and consistent growth over the last few years. In this regard, interested companies can also consult the Food 2025 export strategy elaborated by Fevia. In order to adapt to the new economic and commercial reality and to stand out within a competitive international market, Belgian food businesses will of course have to invest, among other things, in innovation, sustainability, new technologies, and logistical solutions. In this sense, innovation continues to play a key role in accelerating the transition towards a more sustainable and inclusive food system. Moreover, developing sustainability as an international brand will strengthen our businesses' international reputation, thereby giving them a competitive advantage. The ability of Belgian businesses to adapt and distinguish themselves through sustainability will indeed enable them to consolidate their existing markets while also finding new ones to export their products to. It is indeed only by stimulating a sustainable food system, promoting responsible food production, processing, and packaging that our Belgian businesses will be able to distinguish themselves internationally from an environmental, economic, and social standpoint, also enabling Belgium to fully comply with the objectives of the European Green Deal and the Farm to Fork strategy. The last point will be some pieces of evidence of companies in a moment that will illustrate how Belgium is already a model student in sustainability, especially with regards to the fight against food loss, waste package recycling, and efficient water and energy use. Belgian food businesses are indeed already pioneers in the fight against food loss and prevent food losses at the level of production and valorize also organic waste, which is the gateway for any business undertaking a sustainable development approach. Food packaging also plays a key role in food system sustainability, and in Belgium, almost 85% of waste packaging is recycled. And in addition, although the volume of food products in the Belgian market continues to increase, the quantity of packaging produced by the entire food industry has remained stable over the last years as a result of major investment in innovation and technological adaptation. Finally, food businesses are also moving towards a reduction in the total amount of energy they consume, namely by taking steps toward diminishing the amount of energy and water used in their production processes. This way, according to Fevia, the Belgian food businesses invest on average at least 9 million euros per year in energy saving measures and renewable energy production. I would like to thank you for your attention. And yes, as indicated by Christelle, the study will be available soon after the webinar. And I'm now pleased to give the floor to 3 Belgian companies that have already proven experts in food sustainability.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Thank you, Lorenzo, for presenting us the main conclusion. And indeed, we will now welcome 3 key actors from the private sectors, and we will start with BIOWANZE and its director, Mr. Pierre Etienne. Mr. Etienne, the floor is yours.
Yes, good morning, everybody. The sound is good, yes?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So I would like to thank the Belgian Foreign Trade Agency for giving me the opportunity to present our company, BIOWANZE. It's quite difficult to present BIOWANZE in 5 minutes, but I will focus on the main topics, the main information. So BIOWANZE is a Belgian subsidiaries of the group Crop Energies, which is the bioethanol segment of the multinational company called Südzucker. Südzucker is divided in 4 segments: sugar, with the, for example, the well-known company Raffinerie Montoise in Belgium; the fruit segment with Agrana in Austria; and a segment called specific products with Beneo, active in the protein sector, or in the special product extracted from the chicory, for example. There is also Friedberger, active in the pizza production. Portion Pack is a co-packer specialized in the individual portions. Next slide, please. Yes. So if we come back on Crop Energies, we have 4 factories, one in Zeitz in East Germany, one in UK in Wilton, one in France near Dunkirk, and of course BIOWANZE based in WANZE. For those who don't know WANZE, WANZE is located between Namur and Liège. There is 3 bioethanol producers in Belgium, and BIOWANZE is the biggest one. Next slide, please. Yes. So BIOWANZE use the wheat as the main raw material. So we are producing what is called first generation bioethanol, but BIOWANZE is based on a unique and innovative model. So we prefer to use the term 1.5 G in place of 1 G. Perhaps we can switch to the next slide. Yes. Now, if we look at the circular economy around BIOWANZE, we see that we are fully integrated in the agricultural sector. We'll see later on that we are not only producing bioethanol with wheat, but a lot of products and co-products. We work in a kind of circular system. So we use mainly wheat and also sugar residues coming from the sugar factory close to the factory. The sugar factory is a part of the Sucrerie Montoise. And we use sometimes also sugar residue from the chicory produced by Beneo. But wheat represents 99% of the raw materials. Sugar residue are only used for technical reasons like the viscosity reduction in the process of BIOWANZE. So from wheat, we produce electricity. We produce electricity, fuel, fibers for the green fertilizer, feed and food products, and fertilizer and feed products are reused by the agricultural sector. Is the reason why I call it circular economy. Now you can switch to the next slide. Yes, quickly some key figures. We are producing 300,000 cubic meters of bioethanol per year, 60,000 tons of gluten. We produce also proteins, it's a residue from the distillation. We'll explain it later on. And we produce also texture with protein. And in September, we will start to produce liquid CO2. We employ 125 permanent employees. There is outsourced employees on site, like consultant or temporary employees. And a study in 2010 estimated that we are responsible for more or less 1,000 direct and indirect employment in the region and in the sector. So we can switch to the next slide. Presented in another way, you have here all the products coming from the wheat. You can see 2 kinds of gluten, the gluten in powder and the gluten in a pellet. The bran is also visible on this slide. The bran is the husk of the wheat. We'll explain it later on. The origin of the wheat is variable. You can see it's between 40 and 50% from Belgium. France and Germany are also the suppliers. The rest of Europe is very marginal. Only some bad crop we need to source our wheat outside the three main region. For this wheat, there is some certification with the nuts value in a European system, and we have a certification called Red Cert. We estimate our GHG savings above 70%. GHG saving is the greenhouse gas saving linked to the use of our bioethanol in place of fossil fuel. We are delivered by truck and barge, and we are investigating on a project to be linked to the railway connection. As you can see on the picture, the small picture, we are close to the river Meuse, and there is also a railway lines close to the factory. Next slide. Just for you, for explaining shortly the process of BIOWANZE, this slide explaining the flow. Our process is continuous, so we run 24 hours on 24 all the year. The first step is the milling. It's a specific milling unit. We managed to extract, to sort the brand with a series of milling and sieving of the flour. The produced bran will be burned in the biomass boiler, and the excess of bran will be sold as GMP bran to the feed sector. We have one main boiler, the biomass boiler, burning the bran. We need also a small gas boiler. The two boilers produce the steam and the electricity with the help of the turbo generator. The electricity is used for the plant, but the excess is put on the grid, and we are also connected to the sugar factory close to BIOWANZE. And the ashes at the outlet of the biomass boiler are valorized as fertilizer by a partnership with a company active in the fertilizer. Coming back on the main process, after the milling, the flour is mixed with water in the gluten unit. After some mixing, we will extract the gluten and separate the starch milk from the dough. The gluten will be dried on two big dryers to be sold in powder, or we can also pelletize the gluten to sell it in pellet, mainly for the farm fishing in the north of the Europe. The starch milk will be liquefied with the action of enzymes and fermented. The sugar will be fermented by the yeast to produce ethanol. At the end of the fermentation, we have a beer around 15% of ethanol. And after two steps of distillation and a step of dehydration of the ethanol, we reach the purity of 99.8% of alcohol. And a residue called protiwance is a residue of the distillation, the bottom of the first distillation column, which is evaporated to reach 26% of dry matter. It's also distributed in the feed sector, mainly for the pigs and the cows. During the fermentation, we produce also CO2, and in September we'll start a new unit which will compressed and liquefied CO2. It's a partnership with a company called Sol, active in the CO2 and all kind of gas. So we will recover with this installation 10 tons of CO2 per hour. You see also a small unit called texture wheat protein. We mix gluten and wheat flour we pass through an extrusion unit to produce texture-rich protein. Texture-rich protein are sold in the vegetarian food sector, like a meat replacer. Next slide, please. Yes, here's some explanation about the CO2 liquefaction. We will purify and compress to 22 bars the CO2 coming from the fermentation, and we will send it by a pipeline to a new unit driven by Sol. The last step is made by Sol is the liquefaction of the CO2 and the shipping of the CO2 in the beverage industry. And the last main slide, we can switch to the. Yes, we are also currently building a new biomass boiler based on wood. The goal is to replace the small gas boiler by a second biomass boiler. We will burn in it wood chips, wood pellets, and miscanthus. It's a big challenge to drive a factory like BIOWANZE by 2 biomass boiler. And after the start of this new biomass boiler in 23, we will be at 90% with renewable energy to power the plant. The 10 remaining % will be the internal gas consumption of the 2 boilers. It's unavoidable to have gas consumption in such a boiler to superheat the steam before the turbine. After 23, you see 25, we have project to reach the 100% of carbon neutrality in terms of energy. And we have some project to develop the biogas on the site or to purchase biogas certificate on the grid. So we will continue to improve our carbon neutrality till we reach the goal of 100%. So as last conclusion, we are not based on the competition of food versus fuel, as we often heard, but we consider more in a circular economy, and we prefer to say fuel and food than food versus food. So that's it for my presentation. Here you can see some, you have some aerial view of the site, and invite you to visit the website of BIOWANZE if you want some more information, or to call me. You have my business card on the slide.
Thank you, Mr. Etienne. We all know more about BIOWANZE, and I have the pleasure now to welcome our next speaker, Mrs. Judith Ketelslegers, CEO FORESIGHTEE. Mrs. Ketelslegers, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Maybe let's try something else. Imagine you are a supermarket or a food company, and it's your job to order or plan production. Where do you start? On the next slide, you will notice why this is so complex. Forecasting fresh demand is above and beyond complex for several reasons, because you have many SKUs, because you have demands very fluctuating, and obviously because you have short shelf life, which makes it impossible to work with safety stocks. What does that mean? On the next slide, you see if you will start forecasting based on averages, which we see happening a lot in the Belgian food industry, you have the yellow line as your forecast, but your demand goes up and beyond that line. So everything above and everything below that line will be either waste or out of sales. On the next slide, you see that if you can forecast better, it will never be perfect, but if your yellow line follows your blue demand line, you will have less error, less manual work. Obviously, you don't have the Excel stress anymore, etc. So on the next slide, what do we do? FORESIGHTEE has an intelligent demand forecast. We do this solely for fresh food because we use artificial intelligence and it adapts to change. It takes external data or external factors into account. We do this today for retailers and retail suppliers for fresh food. And it's also very ideal for VMI, for vendor inventory management, because there also a forecast is key. On the next slide, I will give you the fastest machine learning course you have ever had. Why do you need to consider machine learning for forecasting? Several reasons, and you need to compare it on the one hand to the human brain and on the other hand to other systems like statistics, for example. Maybe let's start with the human. On the next slide, you see a calculating example. If you have on the left one shop with 70 products and these parameters, you have almost 4,000 different combinations to take into account. It's good weather, it's Monday, it's a bank holiday, etc. For a human brain, that's really difficult to process. That's the difference in computing power. For a machine, that doesn't matter. It never gets sick, it never gets tired, and it doesn't matter how many relations you have, you can just add machines. That is the main reason to have this difference. On the next slide, you see the difference in intelligence. So machine learning, the term says itself, the machine learns, so it is dynamic by response. Every time it will check and see, can I learn something? Whereas in statistics, people make the technology intelligent, but if anything changes, a new product, a new competitor, etc., you need to start over, and that just costs a lot of energy, time, a lot of food as well, so a lot of food waste. On the next slide, these are the factors that we already take into account today. So weather, retail promotions, cannibalism in products, inside, outside category, etc. As you've seen, also the combination of all those factors, and because we focus solely on food, we keep adding relevant databases to that. Quickly, then on the next slide, you see our team. I will not go deeper into this. I just wanted to show that we have both retail experience with Davy Sile, who comes from Courant, and maybe some of you know him as well, Philippe Fontaine, the former director of Belgian, currently director of VLAM. So thank you very much. Maybe let's connect on LinkedIn, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for your presentation, Mrs. Ketelslegers. And finally, we will welcome now Mr. Guillaume Wegria, CEO of FYTEKO. Mr. Wegria, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. So thanks a lot also for this opportunity of sharing a few slides on what FYTEKO is actually doing in the sustainable food systems. So FYTEKO is a biotech startup. We're based in Brussels, and we're developing new biomolecule for agriculture. As you might know, actually looking at this slide, crop yield is a bit dramatic, the slide, but the idea is really that crop yield is really impacted by climate change, especially in the southern hemisphere, where drought, heat can really reduce the potential yield of up to 50%. So you might know it, but crops do have some natural defense mechanism against drought, against heat, and often they trigger too late or they're not boosted enough, they don't react enough, and this really impacts the final yield or the quality of the crops. So what we've done in FYTEKO is we've developed some natural signal molecule that really trigger the crop natural response system. If we move to the next slide, it's quite visual. This is a lab experiment, but it also works in the field. It gives a clear idea of the potential of the technology. This is a drought condition combined with heat stress on seedling, and really with the application of our molecule on the right side, and no application of the molecule on the left side. On the next slide, so it really explains how we do. I don't have really the time to really go in details, but we based all our signal molecules on bio-based material, which are purified from natural plant cells. And the signal molecules themselves, they're fully bio-based and non-toxic, and it's produced through a completely green chemistry process using no harsh solvent or no chemicals. In the next slide, you see that these signals molecules that today, let's say, developed in two different kinds of products. One which is a foliar spray called nurse spray, and another one which is a seed treatment we applied with seed companies directly on the seed, which is called nurse seed, because it's like a nurse, it's helping to protect the seeds. And I'll finish, let's say, with a last slide, which gives a bit the evolution of FYTEKO since its incorporation in 2014, based really on the idea of the, let's say, still already the molecule, but the prototype. We acquired several R&D grants from Innovaris Brussels, from the European Commission, also had an EIC accelerator or SIM instrument, which is quite nice for us and really recognize the innovation that we have here in FYTEKO. Also a recognition from the MIT. And we went through 2 roundtables of investment up to now. And today, really, we're putting those 2 first products on the market through 2 different channels. It's mainly sales export. Let's say, mostly for sure selling in the Southern Hemisphere. It's a long-term business model, but we're really looking now to scale up the company and to further innovation. So thanks a lot for this opportunity. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Wegria. And well, it's really now time to begin with the question. And we thank you for your interest because we receive a lot of questions. But given the time schedule, we will limit ourselves to answer the first question. All the other questions will be transferred to the speakers and they will answer you directly. So we start with the first question, and it's a question from Mr. Fabrice Marshall addressed to Mrs. Lambert. And Mr. Marshall asked us any example of completed circular projects.
Yes, I can, for instance, give you the example of Permafungi. It's a company based in Tour Taxi in Brussels. And we cover the coffee grounds from Le Pain Quotidien, and they transform it into mushrooms and endives with the mycelium, which is a product you can make the transformation. And so it's a real close to the loop project. And from the waste of the coffee, they transform it into a new good food product that can be sold to the particular, and also they develop a system that allow to each particular to develop its own transformation system with their own coffee. And I can give you also the example of Fruit Collect. It's a non-profit association, and the founder decided to recover the ugly vegetables and fruits from the garden from the particular, and he decided to transform it into a brand of 10 different fruit and vegetable juices, and they are sold in a supermarket as Farm or Sequoia or Oregano and so on. And with the non-used vegetables or fruits, they provided to an association which made insertion for unemployed people, and they transform again the non-used vegetable and so on in vegetarian burgers. So at the end, there is no waste at all, and also they have a social and democratic governance, and they have also a caterer service. So they really focus on how to use at the end and at maximum the food that people doesn't desire or don't desire. So that's 2 examples that I can provide you.
Thank you, Mrs. Lambert. It's just now time to stop now. Thank you all. I want to thank you all for your presence and participation of our webinar today. I wish you a pleasant reading of the study, and I wish you a really good day. Bye.